privilege to drive in a state is not the same thing as being licensed to drive in that state. Privilege to drive just means, hey, if you are on the road and you're driving on that road and you're legally a U.S. citizen and you're allowed to just be driving around, you have a privilege to drive, no matter if you are from Arizona driving in Colorado or Colorado driving in Texas. You have a privilege to drive. That is very different from being licensed in that specific state. So for example, if you are a licensed Texas holder, or you have a license in Texas, that was a weird way to say that. If you have a license in Texas but you're driving in Colorado, you still have a privilege to drive in Colorado that can be revoked, even though you don't have an actual license here. The licensing is basically an identification form, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can or can't drive in that state. So what happens is if someone gets revoked or their license suspended, people usually say their license is suspended, but what is actually done is their privilege to drive has been taken away. It's easier to say your license has been suspended, but you can actually have, if you're in that example, if you're from Texas, you have a license in Texas, you can actually have your license suspended in Colorado without actually having a Colorado license, because what's actually being suspended is your privilege to drive in this state. Now, there are all kinds of nuances that happen when we're talking about state-to-state DMV communication. But for the most part, every state allows you a privilege to drive, and that privilege can be revoked from that state. And it may have consequences on the state from which you hold a license, but you don't have to have a license in the state to be revoked from driving in that state. Feel free to ask us any questions you may have. Pop comments below. We're happy to help out in any way we can.